Don't let the frogs get hot. I got Jacob Davis next to me from KTCU. We're going to break down this regional. TCU headed to the Fayetteville Regional. We'll talk about it next on Lockdown Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right. It is your team every day. I'm your host, Stephen Simcox. Jacob Davis here with me. And TCU is headed to the NCAA tournament. They qualified automatically by winning the Big 12 tournament. And Jacob, I was sitting there on Memorial Day at like 11 a.m. watching the selection show. And I know that the committee typically likes to keep these things pretty regional. Like you don't want to send somebody across the country for the most part. And so as the bracket started to get revealed and TCU wasn't going to Baton Rouge, they weren't going to obviously they weren't going to go to Stillwater. They didn't end up in Palo Alto playing Stanford. And I started to think, oh man, they might send the Frogs to Fayetteville like they did back in 2019. I know you did some research today, but did you have like an initial reaction to the draw itself, and when you saw those other three teams get revealed, what you thought about TCU's chances kind of immediately when all that went down this morning?
Well, the thing that jumps to mind is TCU's beaten Arkansas this year, and we can get a little more into the Razorbacks later, but we were projected in the Wake Forest bracket. So I think going to Fayetteville, Frogs fans are going to be able to travel a little bit better than going all the way to North Carolina. It's a team that TCU is a little bit more familiar with than the Demon Deacons. And so it's good to see the Frogs getting an opportunity to keep it closer to home and play an opponent that they are somewhat familiar with. And on that note that you brought up, poor Santa Clara having to go all the way to Arkansas instead of getting that Palo Alto regional.
Yeah, that's true. Usually the 4 seed is kind of at the mercy of whatever happens. They end up having to pack up and travel a ways. But that's a good segue. So they did play Arkansas in the second game of the season. And, I mean, to tell you how long ago that was, Cam Brown was your number 2 starter at that time. It was coming off a nice performance by Ryan Vanderhyde against Vandy. And they win that game 18-6. Bats were going crazy. That was a weird start to the year. They won those 2 games, and they actually dropped a game to Mizzou on that Sunday night. But does that mean anything? I mean, I know you had a good note about, a pitcher that sort of emerged that night in relief for TCU for the first time. But going back to February, can we really take anything from that matchup that could give us a clue as to what might happen this upcoming weekend if those 2 teams face off?
So in the sense of, does anything matter for either team from that matchup? No. I mean, everything has changed. You mentioned the reliever who came in. That was Cole Klecker. He is probably TCU's ace at this point. It's such a different season right now. The SEC is an incredibly good conference, and Arkansas is a team that maybe the one thing we can take away, they're a team that is beatable. They're a team that the offense can get stymied a little bit or slow down, and TCU can take advantage of that and score a lot of runs. And they were doing that then. They're doing that now. They just put up 48 over the weekend, set a new Big 12 record. So can you take anything specific from that game? No. But what you can take away is the floors and ceilings of TCU and Arkansas can really determine how this matchup goes. Potentially.
Sure. No, and it's a good point. I mean, the offense looked great that week, or that weekend, I should say, and then sort of had an up and down time. But the last few weeks, they've been incredible. I'm talking about TCU, hitting the ball to all field, scoring a lot of runs. So let's focus a little bit on Arizona because that's the first round opponent. And I was floored when you sent me this. I knew they were like red hot. They were 12-18 in Pac-12 play. And I know, I mean, back in 2019, which I mentioned earlier when TCU went to Fayetteville, They were 2 games under 500 in the Big 12 that regular season. Like, these things can happen, but this is different. And they didn't even win the Pac-12 tournament. They did have a really good showing, though. Fell to Oregon in the title game, made a nice run. But they have some dudes in that lineup, Jacob. And, it's highlighted by a Golden Spikes type of player in Chase Davis. But I was sort of looking at those numbers, and I'll let you sort of run with that more. But a lot of guys hitting over 300 and some good pop in those bats as well.
Yeah, they are the top offense in the Pac-12 when you go by average. They're hitting 320, which is right above Stanford. On base, they're getting 40.6% of the time. Like, crazy good lineup. The headliner, Chase Davis. He was a Golden Spikes Award midseason watch list guy. He's a junior, hitting 369, 21 home runs, 74 RBIs. And this is just mind-blowing. 496 OBP. So 1 out of 2 times he's going to the plate, he's getting on base. Like, that's nuts.
It is nuts. He's been outstanding. But one strange thing about Arizona, you don't see a ton of teams with like a team ERA over 5 that are playing this type of year. I would assume, like, lately, Jake, they've been pitching a little bit better, but that's not the strength of their team. That's not typically how they're going to win games, right?
Yeah, that's right. They did run rule Stanford, and they beat ASU pretty handily. But that Oregon State game, Oregon State was the 2 seed in the tournament, and they allowed a lot of runs. Their probable starter, he could start the Friday game, that's against TCU, or they could save him for the next matchup. But he threw game 1 against ASU and the final against Oregon. He is a 6.50 ERA guy on the year, giving up 1.73 walks or hits every inning he pitches. He started all 15 games that he's appeared in, thrown 70 innings, and they're hitting 317 against him. So, if that's their best pitcher, if they're going to put their best foot forward, I think TCU has an opportunity to take care of business early and really start pushing this Arizona pitching staff like they did all weekend.
Another aspect of this that's fascinating, probably not the most optimistic stat for TCU fans, but Arkansas is really good at home. And I remember a few years back, TCU hung in game 1 against the Hogs. Like, they won their first game. Nicola Dolo was on the mound. He pitched great, just couldn't score enough runs. And then Jared Jancic came and pitched in the regional final. And Jared was a guy that the year before was like the ace of the College World Series staff, or a couple of years before that. And, he struggled. And that crowd got into it, and I think it kind of got in his head. But what's their record at home, Jacob? And that's a typical SEC atmosphere that you're walking into over the weekend.
Yeah, good luck, UT and OU. You're not going to be winning anything in baseball or football. The Razorbacks are 30-4 in Baum-Walker Stadium this season.
Yeah, that's quite a number for Dave Van Horn's club. But as we said, TCU beat them, earlier this year, even though that was months ago, and they're playing red hot. And so I want to talk more about the Frogs here in a moment. I do want to mention briefly Built Bar. Built Bar is great tasting protein bar. You can go to BuiltBar.com, get your order there. Also, you can find them at Walmart or at Sam's Club. Typically only 160 to 180 calories, real ingredients. They use real chocolate. It tastes good, and it's not too bad for you. It's good for you also. Built Bar, if you want to do it in the retail store, you can go to Walmart or Sam's or order it online at BuiltBar.com. Proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So, Jacob, last time we talked, this team was flailing around, didn't have a clear direction. They had just kind of shaken up and reworked their pitching staff by moving Luis Rodriguez and Cole Klecker to the top of it. But TCU closed strong. They took 2 out of 3 from Cal State Fullerton, swept Baylor, took 2 out of 3 from K-State, won the Big 12 tournament by going 4-0. What has been the biggest difference in your mind the last month plus of the season that has led to such a huge turnaround for Kirk Saarloos's club?
Yeah, the biggest difference is definitely the pitching limiting runs. And part of that is putting Luis Rodriguez into the rotation, although he did have the tough opening game against Kansas State. But yeah, limiting Cal State and Baylor in back-to-back games and 3 straight to 1 run. They held that really good Texas State lineup that lit the Frogs up in San Marcos to only 2 back home in Fort Worth. And then they run ruled the first 2 games of the Big 12 tournament, only allowed 3 runs from Kansas State in that second game. And they've also shown a lot of resilience too. So besides the pitching, whenever the Frogs go down, 1-0 early, the bats come alive. They have the pitchers back, and they're not falling into, a 2-0, 3-0 hole and not stringing things together. So those have been the 2 really big differences, and they have come at the right time for the Frogs.
Pitching is definitely better. Also hitting the ball better. Braden Taylor has had an outstanding season. I would say sort of went through the slump in the middle of the year, but now your all-time career home runs leader for TCU. I mean, that's a special moment, Jacob, for as good as this program has been, for him to be at the top. And he's just a freak, both, hitting the ball and playing third base. He's just an absolute dude. How fun is it to watch him play on a, daily, weekly basis as you've got to cover this team?
Yeah, I mean, he's been so special. Like, it's clear why Eric Longenhagen had him as his number 2 prospect in the upcoming draft. Man, I would love if the Rangers could somehow get him. I don't think it's happening, but yeah, I was really impressed by his defense this weekend. Like, he really showed what he's able to do over at third. He gets a lot of tough plays, and I remember the Frogs got into a little bit of a jam. I think it was in the second Kansas State game, and he was able to get a guy out at third and then also get a double play 5-3 and just shut it down, got the Frogs out of the inning. And like you said, with the home runs, that was an incredibly special moment, getting to become the all-time leader. He hit 3 home runs in the tournament overall, was the most outstanding player. I think he hit 500, just incredible showing from him. And as long as he is hot and the people around him are getting on base, the Frogs offense will be putting points on the board.
A couple pitching questions for you. One guy that sort of emerged for me is Sam Stoutenborough. It's not always pretty. He's not going to miss a ton of bats. Guys make contact, but for the most part, he's been able to hang in games, go 5 or 6 innings, deliver quality starts. How big has his emergence kind of been in this back half of the season as a real deal third starter that they can roll out there on a weekly basis?
Yeah, it's been absolutely huge. Talking back again to February, that's how he started the season, was that sort of third starter against Missouri, and he had a good showing that day. And then against Cal Fullerton, that's kind of around the time the Frogs were shaking up that pitching rotation, and he only gave up 2 earned runs in that game, 1 earned run against Baylor, 1 earned run against Kansas State in the final season series, and then the 3 earned runs in the tournament. But he held down the Frogs pitching staff. They only had to use 2 arms that game because of him and Abelt's amazing performances. He went 5 2/3, and coach left him in, helped him, let him get out of some jams. And he also struck out 3, get a lot of really good movement on his pitches. And, it's been huge for the Frogs after losing Vanderheim, Cam Brown, and having some of those changes going on in the pitching rotation. Definitely good to see him settle in, and knowing that you can go Luis Rodriguez, Cole Klecker, Sam Stoutenborough every weekend.
So the bullpen, it's kind of been a game of musical chairs all season long as far as who do you trust the most. Luke Savage is back, though. He looked good. And another guy you mentioned, Ben Abelt. I don't know why, Jacob. I guess I just didn't realize until the last few weeks just how electric his stuff can be. He was throwing 93, 94 against K-State in that relief appearance, getting a lot of strikeouts. Are those the 2 names that you trust the most in big situations down, in the postseason. I know Garrett Wright struck out the side on Sunday as well, but who are a few of the arms that you're going to watch and that you feel like Kirk is going to make the call to the pin, as soon as the starters run into trouble this week?
Yeah. By the way, you're exactly right about actually getting to see the miles per hour on the score bug. That makes a big difference for going, whoa.
Yeah.
I didn't know Ben Abel was throwing 94. So,
Right.
and then also, I love his delivery. Yeah, I think he hit a dude because he has this like drop down kind of sidearm thing.
Mm-hmm.
He hit a right hander in the back. I'm pretty sure. So, like, just a crazy awesome pitcher to watch aesthetically. But yeah, Ben Abelt's probably my number one name out of the pen. 4.17 ERA on the year, and earlier in the season, like the middle of the season, when the Frogs were having their little bit of a slide, he had started giving up a couple runs. He had the tough start against West Virginia, but out of the bullpen, he's been so good, and he's been getting that ERA lower and lower as the season's gone on. Luke Savage too. You talked
Mm-hmm.
about his performance this weekend. He was great against Oklahoma State, held it down against Kansas, and also had a good outing against Kansas State the weekend before. So he's picked it up right at the exact time. He's a guy who potentially could get a spot start because he was also planned to be in the rotation at the beginning of the year. So I don't think it's likely, but yeah, he's a dude that could go 4 innings in a game if something were, if Cam gets a start and gets into a little bit of trouble, Luke Savage is there. Hunter Hodges, his last couple of relief appearances, just 1 pitch, 1 out, and then 3 pitches, 2 outs, just super efficient. Cohen Feaser's been really good. He gave up a couple runs yesterday against Oklahoma State, but he hadn't pitched since the Kansas State series. And before that, he had a sub-2 ERA. So he's just been really consistent when coach has been using him. Garrett Wright, you talked about his striking out the side, and he was also second team all Big 12. So I think he's another guy who's finally really settling in. And, we saw Jax Traeger and Chase Hoover in game 1. They both had good outings for the Frogs to, again, save arms. And they're 2 guys that are not really TCU's primary bullpen arms. We've kind of gone over the other ones, but Jax Traeger, I was really impressed with what he did, only allowing 1 run in that inning that he came in where the bases were loaded. And so, yeah, that's kind of what the TCU bullpen's been looking like. And any of those guys, if they're coming into the game, like I have a good feeling about them being able to get TCU out of any situation.
I got one more question / theory I want to ask Jacob about, but we'll take a quick break here and we'll be back on Locked on Horned Frogs. Okay, so Jacob, before we go, I feel like sometimes I'm a little too obsessed is probably the wrong word, but I get too fixated on this guy. But Cam Brown, the stuff is there, and it's just kind of you never know what you're gonna get. But he threw in that game against K-State on Wednesday in the opening game of the Big 12 tournament, and my man is just always laboring. Like, he pitched fairly well, but he got helped out by Carson Bowen throwing somebody out at third. Got, I think, a double play maybe on the next pitch. Anyway, threw like 100 pitches in 4 innings or 3 1/3 or whatever it ended up being. Just walked a bunch of dudes, but I mean, limited the damage on the scoreboard. I know he had a good spot start against Louisiana last year in the NCAA tournament, but I want to throw this theory at you, and I don't have numbers in front of me, but I know that he came in that K-State series a few weeks ago and was really good in relief. And in the past 2 seasons, like, he's made a couple of relief appearances when things have gone poorly for the scheduled starter and has done a nice job. Could we ever see, or do you think it's possible or a good idea that on a night where they would need Cam to start, could we see an opener? Could we see someone for 1 or 2 innings, and then you bring Cam in and hopefully get 4 or 5? Because, again, like, it's there. It's been there for 3 years. He just has never been able to fully bring it together.
I would love that. I don't think coach thinks in that way. I don't think he thinks opener. He goes, well, no, this guy's my starter, so Cam Brown's my reliever. So I think we're more likely to just see Cam Brown get rolled out as a starter, like we saw against Kansas State in a crucial game in the Big 12 tournament. Yeah, the first game of the series, like setting the tone. And you're right, he walked the 6 guys, and that's just kind of been the story of Cam is hitting guys and walking guys. And when you look at the raw numbers, like only 8 hit by pitch, but he's doing it every third appearance, hitting a guy or two. And the free passes always come back to haunt TCU. And he's got great stuff. Just like you said, we see it in the strikeout numbers too. He's thrown 48 innings. He struck out 55. Like, he could do that. But if guys aren't swinging at your stuff because you're just throwing balls, then you got a real problem. And I remember the West Virginia series. That was the first kind of comeback for him after getting, I don't know if he had an injury or if he got, quote unquote benched as a starter, but he came into the West Virginia game and TCU had just clawed back. They made it 7-14. They looked like maybe they could get back in it and not get swept. And he gave up 3 walks, gave up all the earned runs, and TCU got run ruled. And his game ERA for that day was 99 in his 0 innings pitched.
Don't use that example. That doesn't back up my theory super well.
No, I mean,
but I get what you're saying. It's always a Jekyll and Hyde thing, and he's had a lot of chances. I think he'll get a chance this weekend because you have to have a lot of arms, and whether it's in relief or as a starter, he's the guy that can give you innings. But it's always just a coin flip onto what version of him you're going to get. But he did look. I mean, the walks were the walks, but he looked better against K-State.
The thing about Cam Brown is he's a great guy. The dude's a freak mentally. Like, I was talking to somebody who's around the team, and he was like, yeah, he'll be in a hotel room just watching college baseball. Like, he loves the game, and he's a local kid too. So I love that. He's a great guy, and I hope wherever he goes in the MLB, they could get that control tightened up, really because I know he's really into the pitching mechanics, the biomechanics thing about that. And, I want him to really lock in, get his routine down, and just throw some strikes. Sure. That's what you got to do to be effective with all the moving stuff. Is you need guys to maybe think you're not going to walk them.
Jacob, will you be doing pre and post game coverage for KTCU this weekend while they're at the NCAA tournament?
Absolutely, and you can listen to that on 88.7 FM. That's KTCU, the choice in Fort Worth. We also have a stream that you can listen to online. So check that out. And you can also hear me. I didn't mention this last time. I have a podcast called Second Cut from the Film Magazine. And we talk about mixed review movies and have a fun time.
Second Cut podcast and TCU baseball on KTCU. I'm a former KTCU DJ / on-air personality. So it's a good station, good to listen to. Jeff Craig and Janice McCall do a great job running that thing. And so thank you to Jacob for being here. We'll be locked into TCU baseball this weekend, and hopefully we're talking about a super regional appearance next week. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It is your team every day.